You have a poem to share with us, I know, about what it was like in the hooch with the terror of living there. Please share it with us.
This poem holds some of the first impressions that I had when I got to Vietnam. And the poem talks a little bit about my innocence coming into a war zone. The poem is titled, "Kiss Goodnight." The war cut into my life like a sharp knife. I didn't know I was bleeding until I looked down. I lived in the certainty of a small town, high school, basketball coach, girlfriend, kiss goodnight. All vanished, 1, 2, 3, in the Nam. No one even looked like my basketball coach, and Charlie was waiting to kiss me goodnight.
There's an irony here, you know.
We don't need to escalate.
There's a kind of an irony here that, well, no one else is caring about you but your buddies. Charlie cares about you. Viet Cong cared about you. They cared about you to kill you, but they did care. They wanted to know who you were, where you were.
Yeah, that's true, Mark. I've never thought of it that way, but they really cared. They wanted to know exactly where we were and what we were doing and how we were doing it and why we were doing it. And they were very focused on us.
And how did they try to get you, kill you?
Most of the combat took place during the night. That's when the movement of the Viet Cong was most prevalent. They could move under the cover of darkness. They could slip in and out of wires, barbed wire. They could slip onto the base with satchel charge and blow up helicopters.
They did slip underneath the wires.
You know, they would grease themselves up, and they call them zappers. And they would slip through the barbed wire with detonation charges, aiming to get into a helicopter to blow it up.
You once told me a story about how you were on the observation tower with the lights going on the beach. The barbed wire was on the beach, and they would slip underneath, and there was nobody on the ocean. Could you tell that story?
Yeah. Was in a tower, a 40-foot steel tower, looking out on the South China Sea. And in the evening was the only time that we manned those towers, because it was in the evening when the Viet Cong would slip in off of a boat, up through the wire, into the base compound.
And during the day, because they didn't fight during the day, you can go surfing then.
Right. During the day, there were men swimming in the beach.
Fine. You're there on the tower.
I'm on the tower, and I'm staring in the middle of the night, looking, straining, trying to stay awake. I'm looking out over the ocean, waiting, pinching myself, biting my lips, trying to stay awake.
Right. If you fall asleep, they come in.
And I'm looking out there, and I think that there's nothing there. And as the dawn starts to come up, there in front of me are literally 1,000 little boats with men in them.
And what are those boats doing?
They're fishing. But they could have been filled with Viet Cong, and I wouldn't have known the difference.
You were very vulnerable. The boys were all vulnerable, weren't they?
Absolutely.
There was no safety, was there?
And there was no support for us when we got back.
Tell me about fighting itself. Did you kill anybody?
I'd have to say I can't tell you that for sure, because I fired that weapon into the grass, into the tree line. I fired it, the M60 machine gun, the M50 machine gun, and I never actually saw another man or a human being fall.
Did you think you were going to die?
I thought constantly that I was going to die. I have 13 months of thinking no other thought but that one. And that's part of the post-traumatic stress that I think I carry back from the war.
What does that do to you? What did it do to you?
It stays present in my mind almost constantly. Whenever I get scared, whenever a car backfires, whenever something happens that has to do with loud noise, immediately I'm back in my body. There's a certain terror that has nothing to do with thoughts. It's just a body reaction. And that's till today. Just the other day I was sleeping and some kids threw firecrackers out in the street, and I woke up, boom, my heart in my mouth.
Was there any sense of anybody watching out over you, your COs, your colonels, generals, anybody?
Not really, Mark. There was not much of that. In fact, the phenomena of fragging was taking place. The fragmentation grenades were put out by enlisted men for military officers to be blown up.
They would blow up their own people.
They would blow up their own people. This was a phenomena that maybe I read somewhere that it was 400 or 500 of these incidents happening throughout. This was the first war ever on record that this kind of thing was done.
And American people killing American people?
American people killing American people. American soldiers killing American soldiers. There was such a schism between the ranks because the war effort versus the anti-war effort had literally become an element that we were dealing with in the battlefield.
What was it like on base?
It was terrifying on base because there's another area that doesn't get talked very often about, and it's the racial dynamic that was going on. There were many, many black men that were sent. In terms of numbers, there were many more black men sent than white men.
Sure.
And so there were very high numbers of blacks and whites stationed together. And the racial tension that was going on back in the United States manifested itself as well in Vietnam. And so there were often race riots.
So you had African Americans with guns, you had whites with guns, and there was as yet no reconciliation.
That's right, Mark.